Okay, so I'm here to introduce Maria Diemling. Is a reader in Jewish-Christian relations at Canterbury Christchurch University and an honorary fellow at the Praxis Institute for Jewish, non-Jewish relations at the University of Southampton. Maria is a trained historian with a PhD from the University of Vienna, with a particular interest in Jewish history in the early modern period, Jewish-Christian relations, and aspects of contemporary Jewish identity. She is fascinated by the complex relationship between Jews and Christians and how both groups have imagined each other over the centuries. Maria has published widely on the perceptions of the Jewish body, Jewish converts, Jewish attitudes towards Christianity, and most recently food as a marker of identity and the ethics of food choices in contemporary Judaism. Her most recent book, co-edited with Larry Ray, is Boundaries, Identity and Belonging in Modern Judaism. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here in Woolwich again, and thanks, Gabby, for the invitation. I've decided to speak about poverty because I think it's a really important social justice issue, and as a mother, I'm troubled by the fact that in this country there are children who go hungry if they don't in the holidays because they don't get a free school meal. And as a taxpayer, I'm appalled by the idea of stigmatizing people because they're on benefits, or by penalizing and humiliating people because they have a tiny spare bedroom they may need for their grandchildren or for a carer or so. So I think the current public debate on poverty is one where religious traditions can make a contribution to. And because my expertise is Judaism, I want to give a few examples from the Jewish tradition how religious traditions and voices could perhaps contribute to the public discourse on poverty. So I have very little time, so I want to focus just on a few key issues. Sorry. The first one is justice, the importance of justice in Judaism. So I will be showing a few biblical passages which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but as I'm sure you're aware of, Christianity and Judaism share the same so-called Old Testament tradition, but while Christianity went off in one direction with the New Testament that the Church fathers, Judaism went off in a somewhat different direction via the extensive literature of rabbinic Judaism. So I think from a Christian perspective, it might be interesting to see what Jews have done with these shared biblical traditions. So I really want to begin with justice as a core value in Judaism. Deuteronomy, justice you should pursue, and Deuteronomy gets a lot of examples how society, a fair and just society, should make sure that justice is at the heart of this society. And justice is seen as a core Jewish obligation. And later rabbinic traditions, this is a Midrash, late interpretation on this passage, says God prefers justice, just behavior to sacrifices. So a clear hierarchy of values and of commitment. So justice is something which builds and makes Jewish tradition what it is. So this relates to the idea that it's individual commitment, but also as a community to make the world a better place. And one way of doing so is by focusing on justice. Another idea I want to introduce is the one of human dignity. This comes from a passage you're all familiar with, that Genesis 1:27 makes this very clear. Human beings were created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And this is very special. It's an obligation, and it also an obligation towards God, but also an obligation towards the other. The idea that we are all created in the image of God, and this requires our behavior towards our fellow human beings to reflect this important value. A poor person is as much created in the image of God, so much part of our family. An interesting way in the Bible to refer to this, your brother. So we have the responsibility towards a poor person like we have towards a sibling, and we are not different from a poor person. So we are all equal, and we all, if you want, co-workers in this world. So it's our shared human responsibility to make this world a better place. But because we all came according to the tradition via one man and one woman, there's no hierarchy. There's no social hierarchy. There's no hierarchy in value, and that is really important. We must not think we are better than our neighbours because we share the origins. But it also means an obligation, because as Rabbi Akiva says, we are being made aware that we are created in the image of God. So we are told, and that gives us the opportunity to raise our behavior, to make our behavior appropriate to the obligation. I want to speak a little bit about American Rabbi Arthur Green, whose expertise is particular Jewish mysticism, because I think he has written very insightfully about the idea that we're created in the image of God. So a key point he makes, we are obliged to return the favour, and he goes on to say, it's not only our creative powers, but in particular how we treat others, that we have to respect the other as an equally created person in the image of God. We have to find the love in us towards the other, the generosity of spirit and the full acceptance, both of ourselves. It's also an obligation towards ourselves. And that is also very important. Judaism does not treasure poverty. Judaism doesn't think that poverty is a good thing. So does not encourage giving away all your possessions. And there's no point, and Jewish tradition is very clear about this, there's no point if you make yourself poor by helping others. There's a limitation of what you should give. Because you also owe it to yourself, because you're also creating the image of God. So monastic traditions are not of value to Judaism, but we of course also owe it to the other, and that's an obligation. Ethics of the Fathers, which is a part of the Mishnah, so the first major rabbinical text in Judaism, which was completed around 200 of the Common Era, says we must greet everyone with a pleasant face. A very simple sentence. So what does it actually mean? But we can understand this, that we shine upon others in order to help others shine and to validate their sense of worth. So by greeting somebody with a friendly face, we take them seriously as a person, we don't just ignore them. And I think that's a very important message in here. The dignity you give to somebody by acknowledging their humanness, their importance. And it doesn't matter if the cleaner you see when you come to the office this morning, or a very important person, you actually get something back. And I think the idea of justice and human dignity are really two key Jewish ideas we need to keep in mind when talking about how to deal with poverty. So Deuteronomy has two interesting verses. Sorry, I'm not always sure that what I see here is what you see. Sorry, I'm sorry. This is too high tech for me, I'm afraid. Yes, so Deuteronomy has two key verses which seem perhaps contradict each other a little bit. The first one is, there shall be no needy among you. And the other one, a little bit further down, for the poor shall never cease from your land. So the first one we promised, which seems to indicate that poverty can be eradicated. But the next one is a very factual statement. There will always be poor people in our community. So what we could see here, one is a sort of long-term vision for ending poverty, and the other one is sort of a short-term strategy for helping these very immediate needs of people who are poor, food, clothing, sheltering. But we can also read this on a bigger picture, that we cannot ignore the needs of the individual, so we need to reach out and help. But this alone is not sufficient. We need to see the bigger picture. And that is where the Jewish idea of tikkun olam, of repairing the world, mending the world, comes in. So it's really also about having a bigger vision and addressing the picture at large. So the Deuteronomy verse in the whole verse is, there shall be no needy among you, since the Lord your God will bless you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you as a hereditary portion. If only you heed the Lord your God and take care to keep all this instruction that I enjoin upon you to this day. So it's a promise, but it also relies very heavily on the Israelites, the Jews, doing their part of the deal that God is offering here. So it's very much something you have to work for, something you have to take upon you as a commitment, as an obligation. And so a communion and individual responsibility. And I want to look at a few possible Jewish responses. How can poverty be reduced? What could the Jewish tradition offer to this? A very interesting concept is Shemitah. So there's a biblical concept which is used in different contexts, but here specifically the relief of debts every 7th year. So the idea that basically debts are written off, and this is obviously meant to avoid pushing people in that further into that and making them completely destitute. But of course also has to be said that the biblical economy is an agricultural economy, it's quite a simple economy, which bears very little resemblance to the very complex, multinational, globalized community of today. But one could argue that there are certain similarities. If we look in the contemporary context at the attempts of providing debt relief to heavily indebted poor countries as a form of contemporary international aid, so to help countries to sort of get their act together and to avoid being further and further pushed down a line of, where you can't simply drown in the debt. One possible criticism is how effective is this? And another one is, what is the impact on the affected countries? And something which was already recognized in rabbinic times is if debts are not being paid back every 7 years, in 6 years, it's very difficult for poor people to get credit because the people who provide them credit don't know that they won't get the money back. And in the rabbinic tradition, you can't just abolish biblical commandments because it's a God-given commandment. And even if you think, oh, it's not really working, you can't just abolish it. But what Rabbi Hillel in the 2nd century did, he saw a way around of preventing poor people not getting credit. They need it. And so the legal fiction, as it were, was being created when the court took immediate position between the person needing the credit and the person who provided the credit. And this is perhaps something that could be, in one way or another, taken on board in contemporary discussions about debt relief. Another possible verse we can look at, and there are many, many examples in the Jewish tradition on poverty, I'm just focusing on a few, is the passage, the Levite has no proportion, no inheritance among you. And then a little further, do not neglect the Levite. So, from a Jewish perspective, there's always a reason if something is repeated. So it's not just editorial mistake or just an oversight or just an arbitrary occurrence of a text that has been transmitted over a long time. There is a reason. So one interpretation of this is that it doesn't only refer to the Levites, or to a very specific group in Jewish society, but it could refer to all the landless people who don't own property. And a possible response to this is to engage much more in helping people to get a share of the land they actually own, or they can lease in a way they have security, because it provides people with a source of income, but also stability and security. So in terms of formalizing informal ownership of land and goods. Yeah, I'm really coming to my end. Another, I think, really important aspect is the passage from the Talmud. One who causes others to give is greater than one who simply gives. This in Talmud is Agavapata. And I think what this could imply is the importance of organization and mobilization. So it's great to give on an individual basis, to give charity, but in the Jewish spirit, it's even better to organize a community, to organize as a bigger group, because we then make a much bigger difference. And I don't have time to go into this, but the medieval philosopher Maimonides, for example, he worked out a hierarchy of giving, as it were. And at the top of this list is the best kind of charity, the best kind of poverty prevention is to help somebody to set up a business, or to another way to make them independent. The worst way is to give in a way that you humiliate the other person, that you don't give it graciously. So that is really important. So I'm coming to my conclusion. What I would say is that the Jewish reading of biblical pronouncements on poverty, they encourage action. So I would argue that what we can take from this is actually very political. So we shouldn't just accept, this is my personal interpretation here, admittedly, we shouldn't just accept a state-driven ideology of austerity. We can do something about it. So I would argue that social justice is a Jewish commitment and obligation, which is evidenced widely by Jewish text. It's an individual commitment, so we all can do our share by volunteering, by giving, by doing this on an individual basis, the charity of our choosing, but that organized action via social justice program in a synagogue via bringing people together for specific cause is more effective and very much in the Jewish spirit. But we must never forget the two key concepts here: justice. Poverty relief is about justice. It is not a just society if people are poor and are not being helped, if people are stigmatized because they are poor, and dignity. So human dignity, somebody who is poor must never feel embarrassed, humiliated because they are poor. Because, and that is also a key message from Jewish text, it could happen to all of us. And we don't know what erases, and we owe it to the other because we are created in the image of God. Thank you. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce the second speaker on this panel, Eleasah Phoenix-Lewis, who is a young academic who is a Londoner, raised in Brixton, and she's of Jamaican-Irish heritage. She currently co-manages the Black Consciousness and Christian Faith Initiative alongside Dr. Steve Lessam of Spurgeon's College and King's Cross Baptist Church. Eleasah enjoys a variety of research areas within theology, history and religion, but specifically she focuses on theological pedagogy for the Black British community in the face of African-inspired spiritualities as alternatives. I'm also happy to announce that Eleasah has recently married, and she's married to Darren, who is the director for building and construction. So, thank you very much.
Okay, so good afternoon now. Again, my name is Eleasah. I'm here today to talk to you briefly about an initiative that has just started, and it's in relation to faith, philosophy and social justice. And the initiative is called Black Consciousness and Christian Faith. And before I go into that, to build up to that, I need to give you like a little bit of background, how I got to this place and how people fit into it, and also how you can fit into it as well. Like some of our other Black intellectuals and scholars, Paul Gilroy and Robert Beckford and Anthony Reddy, I was born in Britain. More specifically, I was born to a second generation Jamaican father and a Northern Irish mother. We resided in Brixton, South London, and lived in relative poverty. I was schooled locally in two Black majority schools. My primary school was about honouring all cultures and religions. So we had Diwali, we had carnivals for everything, Easter carnival, Christmas carnival, all sorts, yeah. But my second school was a church school, so it was there to honour Christianity, but also to develop young, Black, independent, ambitious women, essentially. And the focus in our household was actually quite more evangelical. There wasn't really there wasn't much culture, to be honest with you. It was about signs and wonders, gold falling from the sky, end times. That's what I know. I know end times. I could tell you every type of end times ever, but I couldn't tell you much about Bob Marley. Yeah, that was my household as I was growing up, which was obviously quite different to the girls I went to school with, who had quite a lot more culture, which is actually where I learned a little bit more about my Blackness and my history. The role models in our house are people like Kenneth Copeland, Carmen. I don't know if you know Carmen. He's like a preacher, rapper type dude, but I didn't actually have any Black role models in my family, apart from Michael Jackson, obviously, which always slipped in. I don't know how they kind of did that, but anyway, my Pentecostal roots grew when I joined a gospel choir with my friends, and it was based in a Church of God of Prophecy denomination, and we did the tours, we did gospel artists and conventions, and that's when I started to understand better a denomination or a Christian culture that was more closely fit into actually what I was in, obviously my dissension or my ancestry, my Jamaican ancestry. In the evangelical, it seemed to be have more a colourblind theology. It wasn't about being Black or being white, but in the Church of God of Prophecy, I found that there was a bigger link to being Jamaican or being Caribbean, which I really, really enjoyed. Later down the line, one of my friends who I prayed with often, and we sang together and stuff, she said, "Oh, Eleasah, I'm leaving Christianity. I'm not really sure about this Jesus thing, I read a book, and apparently J didn't really exist at the time Jesus was around, so his name can't really be Jesus. And I read another book that actually says he doesn't actually exist, he was created for this reason and for that reason, and I'm really confused." But I went to my pastor, and my pastor said, "Those are demonic ideas. So just listen to what I tell you. Don't talk to anybody else." And over the next few weeks and months, she became demonized in the church. And people were told to stop talking to that Rastafari girl over there, and all types of terms that weren't obviously actually accurate to the things she was thinking. But she was treated very badly, and she left. And she's still not a part of the body of Christ at the moment. She's not a professing Christian. And my mind was blown. I didn't know any of this. Obviously, I hadn't grown up particularly in that way, knowing about black culture and history. Obviously, I knew that we come from slavery, but that was the height of it, and you learned that in school. So when I started to kind of read up on what she was getting into, it was like a whole other world. It's incredible. My mind was blown, and I didn't know what to do with it. But it kind of birthed a little mission, because I felt, well, actually, from my understanding, there's no reason why you can't be black, conscious, and Christian. But at the moment, I'm finding a lot more of my friends are leaving church and asking these big questions, not getting their answers, and finding that because of the way that they're treated by their ministers and their parents who are Christians, and because they aren't getting their answers answered, their questions answered, they're finding that Christianity wasn't for them, and they're finding that their identity as a black person, or what was developing and evolving, they're trying to grow, wasn't really matching up with Christianity. Okay. So, it was a peak point at which my mission was birthed. I realized the need for some grassroots, ground level work within the churches, whereby Christians and new disciples could critically engage with scripture, tradition, and themselves, forming a positive and honest black identity in a safe and non-oppressive environment. I held negative views myself personally, previously stigmatizing Muslims, Rastafari, Jews, white people, non-Pentecostals, and even myself. It became evident that knowledge of myself was paramount, and also that for Mark 12:31, love thy neighbor as thyself, to be applicable, I could only do that if I knew myself and loved that self, essentially. So to know myself, I felt I needed to engage more with my history and to understand both my ancestral culture and its historical development, how we got here, how am I this person who is obviously of dual heritage, what it means to me and my place, and what it means in the face of this Christianity that all of a sudden my friends are calling a white man's religion, essentially. My journey in doing my part for pursuing the justice for the black community in this sense was initialized, again, like I said, when one of my closest friends said she was leaving the church. And so black consciousness and Christian faith for me became an education the moment I realized I wanted to marry the two together. The reason we have black theology, or the emergence of African-inspired neo-pagan religions, or the processes of reimagining our identities, is simply because on the surface, black consciousness and Christianity seem to be conflicting forces. How many of us teach in our congregations that God is black? That the justice for the oppressed includes those of us who are still working through the pains and experiences of our enslaved or colonized ancestors while discovering agency and purpose in this Eurocentric reality? How many of us are comfortable to question and reform a colorblind theology or the deceptions laying within multicultural constructs? How many of us have considered that those fringe, Rastafari, confused, conscious type people, that they may actually have a valid point? A lot of things are not adding up. So why have some of our people been leaving the church, feeling out of sorts with this concept of the Son of God? Is it that the British face of Christianity is whitewashed, or that the Pentecostal church have inherited dogma and behaviour birthed by a legacy of slavery and colonialism? Or perhaps because they're sick and tired of feeling bad and they just want to do whatever they want to do? Maybe the powers that be, the popes, the bishops, the pastors, are hiding truths that confirm the black presence as integral and threatening to their empire, or simply that the church is full of closed-minded hypocrites that never answer crucial questions but take you on an emotional ride and pick up your loose change on the way? Is the Queen a lizard? Are black people the true Israelites? Why is there so much death at the hands of God? Can you, or we, be black, conscious and Christian? Black consciousness can be described in many ways, but at this point and for this discussion, it includes the various ways in which people strive for black unity, power, spiritual awakening, economic growth, political justice, and for some, not myself personally, indulge in a black supremacist ideology. At the mention of these ideas, some of you might start to develop a migraine, feel uncomfortable, some might feel inspired, or some have already started mentally rebuking me, my spirit of infirmity. But it is in this space that we need to have that conversation. It's in those feelings that we need to begin on the ground level in our churches on a Sunday in the week, that critical analysis, that discussion. And so 2 years ago, as part of my master's research, I set up a group discussion called Why I Left the Church. And it was basically like an open door for everyone to come in and be like, boy, when I said this and he said this, and just basically kind of complain but share, so I could get a real-time idea of why people were leaving the church in connection with their journey to develop a strong and positive black identity. My initial feelings after Why I Left the Church sessions, I was distressed and discouraged. Our gaps, my gap and their gap, the information and the gaps in their learning was so huge. Wild speculations, poor ideas of historical facts, and then obviously we get the conspiracy theories, which I'm cool with. I love a good conspiracy theory personally myself, but it's more of a hobby, as Gabby knows. I'm pretty sure Jesus is a conspiracy theorist, but we'll leave that for another day. And so what I found was that actually there were loads of people that were hungry to be educated rather than sit in a conference for a weekend, rolling on the floor, speaking in tongues. They wanted to have historical questions answered. Where can you point out Jesus at this time in this place? What was the color of his skin? Do you know what I mean? Why does this book of Josephus say maybe he wasn't really a person? Answer me those questions, but what they were in fact getting was, just focus on what the Holy Spirit might be telling you. And, learning about love and faith and how to be like Jesus. But their question was, how can I learn to be like someone I'm not sure actually existed and maybe was white, or do you know what I mean? And then they just gave it to our ancestors and enslaved them with Christianity. How can I get to that point if you're not going to help me understand the beginning bit? And it doesn't apply to everybody. Some people love to sing for 2 hours and experience God in that way, but other people can experience God through education and through books. As I continued to research, turning to non-white scholars and exploring approaches of pedagogy from other faiths, it became apparent that the crux was not that the issues were being overlooked. The work is all being done, it just hasn't really translated into us normal young people yet. It hasn't become anything that we can kind of like, oh yeah, I get that in 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean? It's digestible, it's very complex, sometimes inaccessible as well. The churches don't provide the resources for the books that might be very expensive, or the subjects that take longer to explain. And the essential works remain theoretical. And in order for my research and my data collection to be valuable, I realized that I felt I had to develop into an educational program rather than further theories of what we could be doing to make it better. And this is where we can work together to bring justice for the everyday Christian, where faith meets philosophy, meets freedom, meets independence, which essentially meets refinement. So, recently, the Black Conscious and Christian Faith Initiative, I've teamed up with my supervisor for my master's course, and he's opened his doors. He's the pastor of King Cross Baptist Church, and basically what we do is we're trialing this program, talking about a different subject that relates to Black consciousness and Christian faith. We had Paige Samuels the other day come in and talk to us about the possible parallels between Jesus and the horror story of ancient Egypt. We basically churn out our ideas based on the feedback that we get from the previous sessions. So if all the questions are about ancient Egypt and have we really come from there, or are, Hebrew, Black people, the original Hebrews, we try to keep the subjects relevant. We do like an education, teach about what's out there, and then basically let people converse, because essentially they can get it all from YouTube if they want to, or they can get something from YouTube. It might not be good, but they can get something. But what they actually want is to be heard. a lot of these people left the church not based on the fact that they were confused, but based on the way that they were treated. So this initiative is as much about education as about building relationships and being humble enough to say in your minds that might be slightly weird, but we're going to sit and listen and talk about it anyway. If you really want to know if the Queen's a lizard, we'll get some books and sit down together. You know? So it's just about building that relationship. So the ethics is about having an open ear, tackling difficult questions, accepting the mistakes on our part. Not every church is perfect. People are not perfect. And the church, the institutional church, is run by people. And opening the floor up for all ideas. So we do get people saying in Egypt in 5-4 this BC and all this kind of stuff. And nobody rebukes them, no heresy in here. We allow everything to come out and people to develop the independence to critically assess the information that they're getting. And it is, it's tricky and it is a bit risky, but so far it's working because people are coming back. They say, if church is doing this, I'll come back. We're really trying out a different way and it is unconventional. And so I'll round up because obviously I know about time. But basically, further to this, we're just going to keep going. We've had 2 sessions so far. The feedback has been varied. Some people saying, you need to preach more. It's all in vain if you don't talk about Jesus coming back and all this kind of stuff. And I think it kind of missed the point a little bit. But other people say, if you took it out of the church, maybe more people would come. So we've got quite a variety of feedback here. But it's developing. Our first session, we had 100 people come. We thought we were going to have 8 people. We were ready to sit in a little circle, have a little Bible and maybe a side book. We had 100 people come. People from outside of London come because the demand is there. People coming from churches saying, we can't talk about this in our church. And the reason why I'm saying this and bringing this to you is it's an example of how we can action justice within our congregations, where our faith and our philosophies in the education system, higher education system, where we can meet together and transform our people for the justice for their own identities as Black people, people of ethnic minorities, but also justice within our churches as well to rectify some of the problems that we're having with communicating between the age groups, between the new cultures that are developing as well. And so I think I'll round up there with this. My ideas, I do not believe are new or revolutionary.
You come into the church and be what someone wants you to be, give all your money, give all your time, but Jesus is actually for you and for them individually. So I have 4 children, so I have a young gentleman in my life at the moment, is my son, who went at a crisis, and he says, Mama, I want to come to church with you when you're going next. So that shows me that this young man is in need of something. But when he talks to me, otherwise he said, I don't want your Jesus, and I don't want, this. You do what you're doing over there and I'm okay here. But in actual fact, when he's sinking, there's a Jesus that he knows that can save. And this is what the church, I feel, this day is neglecting to show people. The Jesus in your own location. The Jesus that is the real Jesus. Not this thing that you said people make up in this orchestrated church service, and they use Jesus to perpetrate their own actions and take the little bit of resources that you have, the energy that is taking you to come to church to look for what is in there for you. They take that off of you and make you into somebody else, and you leave there empty. And you really need Jesus in your life, So I say education and coming into this place is very important to let people know that there is something more inside of you that we can give you back. We're not here to take from you, we're here to give you. So that is what Jesus means for people, and thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you.
Okay, second question was, do you want to respond to that? Sorry, okay.
Was it behind you?
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah, my name is Michael.
Speak up. Volume, Michael, please. Speak up, Michael.
Yeah, I want to ask questions from Dr. Miriam. Maria. Yeah, you said that God created mankind in his own image, Genesis 1:27. Now, when Dr. Page, last week he taught us in Islam, Pillars of Islam, he said that God created man with clots of blood. Clot of blood. I don't really understand clot of blood and his image. That is first question. That is my first question. The cloth of blood and from God's image. The second one, he said that regarding to social justice in Christianity and Islam, he said that in the pillars of Islam, the zakat, they said the 2.5% of their asset, capital asset, they gave it as alms to the poor as justification of wealth. But in the Muslim Christianity, 10%. But now he said that in the Muslim, 2.5 is more valuable, using in a valuable way than the Christianity. I want you to throw light to that one for me, please.
Can I pass this on to Omir, since luckily we have an Islamic scholar here?
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you're asking whether the 2.5% zakat comes to about the same as the 10% tithes in the Christian tradition. 2.5% zakat is on the entire, well, it's worked in different ways depending on different things. So it can be on gold, it can be on sheep, it can be on money, it can be on the entire wealth. So all in all, it does come to, I'm not sure if it's equivalent, but it comes to quite a bit.
But they said, what I want to clarify is, they say that money, if the wealthy man wealthy people in the Islam, they use that money to sponsor many people to hide pilgrimage or something. But they use it in a godly way. Let me put it in that way. But in Christianity, maybe when they say tithe, maybe they're not tithe now today meant for the pastor. I don't really know. Because in the Old Testament they say it's for Levi, but now I think it's for pastor alone. That is what I want to. Because yes.
The pastors are the Levites.
Okay, no,
I don't think he can tell you that. You have to ask pastor. Yeah, you got to talk to him. Outside the church.
I think there's a third question.
Sorry, I think let's stop the hubbub a minute. Sorry, please. Just to clarify, what's your name again, sir? Michael asked a question, and what we're basically saying, we don't think it's for the Islamic scholar to answer it, because it's about when, as Christians, in Christian churches, you're giving your tithe. That's your 10% of your net or gross. It's part of your income, probably the net income or something. What is that used for? So, but that's for pastor to answer. I think you take that to your church.
But it's not for pastor though, it's for the church.
Yeah, but he can't answer this.
All
right then. All right, let's move on. And now I'm going to ask my question. Yeah, sorry, please.
Do you want someone to contribute to the question that is posing for?
Well, if somebody can, then I'll sit down. Sorry.
I think maybe the church you come from, they let you know that the tithing is for the pastor. It doesn't mean that way. Generally speaking, if anybody is a New Testament member, it is not about tithe. It's supposed to be an offering. And when we put in offering, you have to be on yourself, between yourself, how much you give in and how much you earn it. So you put up the money into the way you want to do it. Some churches make it to be like a tithing to you. But that is used to run the ministry. It's not for a pastor. So it may be if you see your pastor is embezzling the money, that way you have to ask your pastor, what is that money used for? Okay, so that is not meant for pastors. The money is not for pastors, it's for running about the church. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I'm taking over. Which I will do if you want me. So, just to say thank you, Dr. Marian Eleasah. I think your talks sort of complemented each other in the sense of how it hit me, and I just sort of feel blessed to be in the presence of a young person as well that's taken on some of the issues that I've personally battled with going through the church, and I was one of those backsliders, and in the end I converted to Catholicism. Don't ask me why, I just did. So I can drink my wine when I want to. If anyone is going to judge me, I say let God judge me, yeah? But Dr. Maria, I suppose the question, or what came to me, and I think it's something that always hits me with religion. We're always talking about how we treat each other. And just to give you an example, when I came here today, the first thing downstairs I say morning to everyone and didn't necessarily get an answer. And I was trying to say that is exactly it. Is the way we treat each other. if there's a Jesus, that Jesus is in me, and if I don't reflect it, it isn't in me, or it certainly is asleep that day or whatever. So when you say that we are all equal, immediately what came to me is no, we are not, question mark. So I don't know if you wanted to come back on that at all. And then for Elise, I'm taking my time because last time I did that, I didn't get back to Dr. Beckford. Love yourself. You said this thing about loving yourself. Love your neighbour as you love yourself. And I think that's where I wanted to get back. I think there's a great African proverb that says, when you point a finger at somebody, as I'm sort of doing now, there's three, right, that points back to yourself. So you are right. I have to know myself to be able to have a voice, to be wanting to support somebody else or encouraging somebody else, or even to be a pastor talking to somebody else. And I think that's where, when the young people are having their issues and their concerns and their questions, if they're not being addressed, effectively they're turning their back on the individual, not necessarily believing in a higher power, whatever it is. That's how I concluded it for myself. And I do see myself as being one of the original Hebrews, but that's another story.
I think equality is an ideal, and we're trying our best. We're just human beings. But I think Judaism is very much aware that's how it should be, despite, of course, the differences in society, in class and income and wealth in Jewish culture as much as elsewhere. But, for example, if you think about funerals, funerals are as simple as possible. That it's not a show-off. There are no expensive coffins, there are no huge flower arrangements, horses drawn, because nobody should be shamed in death because they're poor, because their families are poor. So the richest person is buried either just wrapped in the shroud or in a very, very plain wooden coffin. And I think that's a very powerful symbol of aiming to be equal in life, or perhaps not always, but we should be equal in death. So I would say it's an ideal. Jews aim to strive at. But of course people are not perfect. So.
You have the next question, Robert.
It's the next round of three.
Next round of three. Okay, gentleman there in the black jacket. You there, and gentleman at the back. So yes, you're up next, yep.
Should I stand up?
Whatever you want to stand up, that's your question.
First of all, thank you for coming. I really enjoyed the talk. They were really informative, inspirational, and been a great part of the day. My question to the doctor is that, do you think that there's a political party which best represents the solutions to poverty in line with the Jewish religion? And my question to you would be, how have you found that consciousness in regards to your faith in Christianity? Has it helped strengthen it? Have you found conflict? And how have you gotten past it?
I don't really think there is a British party that tackles this. When I really chose on justice and dignity, because I think the public discourse, and I'm saying this as a person who's not allowed to vote in this country because I'm not British, but I think it's neither about justice nor about dignity in the public discourse. The only party I can actually think of is an Israeli party, which is Hadash, which is a strongly communist-influenced Jewish Arab party, where social justice is very much part of their manifesto, but they are not particularly successful. But I don't see it in the British landscape, actually, sadly. I don't think it's in the left part. I think we have sort of grown used to this language of austerity that benefits, somebody on benefits has become a byword for somebody who is lazy and basically a parasite. So it has lost the neutrality of the words, and I think the current debate is not about solidarity. That people don't feel proud that their taxes support society, but they feel disadvantaged because they pay taxes which support other people. And I think the public discourse in the UK needs to change to reflect justice and human dignity.
Okay, and so my journey with Black consciousness and Christian faith, I find that it has strengthened it. I do feel that at this time it's given me more of a sense of purpose, to be honest with you. It's given me some direction. Like I said before, I grew up kind of evangelical, stars and wonders, oil coming from your hands, I'm from that kind of stream. And I think for me, coming from that stream, I wasn't afraid of what was difficult, or a difficult history, or a difficult, I don't know. I guess I kind of felt bold. So every time I read something that might say, Jesus doesn't exist, or this is the alternative history, or maybe Jesus is a rip-off from ancient Egypt, I feel that I feel more inspired to find the truth, basically. And I think that's what Black consciousness is doing, because it's helping me obviously place myself in England as someone of dual heritage. Obviously, I might not have the same issues as some of my friends who may be darker skinned women, but dual heritage obviously can carry its own prejudices as well, especially as a woman. But I find that it's helping me to see the rest of the world as it is, rather than in a closed box, just seeing Brixton, just seeing my church every Sunday and the ministries within church, and just seeing my pastor. It's challenged me to look outside of that, because God's looking down and seeing everything. Do you know what I mean? And to answer your question or your statement, I guess, is that under God we are all equal. Under man we can't be. It's impossible because we're imperfect. But this has given me, I guess, a sense of purpose into try and realize, as Dr. Miriam was saying, that justice and that equality through our faith. So looking at some of these difficult questions, bringing the equality in the way that we just discuss and meet with each other and with anybody, interfaith discussions, bringing that social justice and reflecting that equality from God into the rest of the world is basically at the minute what it kind of looks like for me. And so, I mean, people are experiencing it in different ways. People are finding it very difficult. They can't leave the house, or they're getting all their tattoos and changing their whole appearance aesthetically because they're finding the conflicting forces very, very difficult. But I found in every book I read, I found more of God. I found more of Jesus. In every narrative from another part of the world, every ancient culture, I'm like, I recognize that story. And I feel like it's given me a bit more boldness to be a lot more open than maybe what some of my past churches would have allowed for and accepted, essentially. So for me, it's bringing more freedom, which is very positive. And I'm hoping that other people find that as well, rather than kind of the fear and the guilt factor, I guess, is the response.
Question there.
Yeah, my question goes to my fellow brothers here. That gentleman there he asked two questions, but one was answered. He said the first question was that we are created in the image of God, which I do understand from my own religious view. And he said, in the Muslim, from the clot of blood, man was created. Can you explain to me what is the...
Yes. So, are you asking, is there equivalent to that teaching?
Yes, the clot of blood. When you say man is out of Sam, we are made by Sam. But in the Muslim, clot of blood, is it woman blood? Where is the blood coming from?
Or tonic.
Yeah, I don't think we have exactly the same metaphor or imagery in the Islamic tradition. But there is a verse of the Quran that mentions the phases of life and how a man or woman, as the case might be, is created in the womb from a clot of blood. That's very physical. It's not very metaphorical. So,
Yes, sorry I came late. Last week I was the first person here, so this week I thought I thought the symposium was 9:30 last week, so I was here about 9. Well, I'm happy that I'm here because I enjoyed this kind of symposium, and thank you for what you've shared so far. But my question or statement goes this way. Now we discover that the Jewish people, they suffered more in terms of racism than any other race in the world. Now, the question I'm trying to ask is that, why is it that we black all over the world, why don't we see how do we solve the problem of the black man in terms of what do we do? Because take for instance, if you have a church in Woolwich, and this church is about 10 or 11, and every week you contribute £1, £11 multiplied by how many? You'll be able to help one black boy on the street. Then all the time, you see a black man is complaining, oh, this person did this to me, this person, and nobody can solve your problem. Until you learn to say, I'm going to tackle my own problem, nobody will solve your problem. So I want, how do we do to solve the problem of the black man?
I'll answer that in 3 words. I don't know that we can answer all of that. Do you want to comment? Answers on a postcard.
Education. Know about history.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to go to Robert and then Michael, you had your hand up at the back, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. I'm sorry for everyone else, we'll have more chance to discuss. We've got other panels coming up, but I am conscious of the time, so we need to keep things moving.
Thank you for both presentations. I have a question for both of you. The first one, Eleasah, how do you turn the Bible study and that event into either a movement which then impacts other churches, other communities, or even allow it to impact on the liturgy, worship, hymnody of the church? So I just wondered if there's any spillover, if people have then said, well, actually, we need to change this song, or has it impacted the preaching, the church? And also, is there a desire to turn it into a movement of sort? Because that's often been the weakness, that the discussions take place, people get inspired, but then there's no movement afterwards. First question. And then Maria's, I think there's a point of connection between both of your studies, because you mentioned the Hebrew Bible quite a bit, and many of the issues that emerge from the identification that African people have with the Hebrew Bible. I just wondered, Maria, if you think that there is any grounds for some of the claims made by some of the new black religious groups that the Hebrew Bible is in effect a text that has been disguised and has obfuscated the reality that it's about black people. Do you see that there's any credibility in that argument at all in terms of that idea? And also, a more easier question is, what do you see within the Hebrew Bible that might provide support for this kind of attempt to syncretize both Christianity, or two religious traditions, really? Is there any hope within the Hebrew Bible that might inspire that kind of activity? So a mixture of questions to both of you, sorry.
Okay, so I'll start first. Yes, I'm not sure if movement is the right word, in the sense that I'm not planning to be the face of anything, like in the sense. But my hope is that I plan to kind of put together some sort of kind of educational resource pack as a starter for any church to take and say, cool, we've got about 5, 40, 100 people that have these type of questions related to this specific thing. Here's some information to help us discuss, help us relate. Some churches have been like, oh my gosh, can you come? And I'm like, well, actually, you could do this yourself. All you have to do is have an opening ear and be willing to read a bit and share. So in a sense, the movement is that we hope that it fanning the flame of people catching on, because a lot of it is just about having the open ear and the humility to have these discussions, and then also providing the education so that it becomes obviously informative as well, because some people want to have an academic experience in church, essentially, is what they want alongside their worship or their all-night prayers or whatever. So yes, in a sense, it looks like a movement. I guess what I'm looking at the moment is something quite similar to what an Alpha course looks like, but specific to the Black British community and the cultures that are coming out of it and the religious ideas that are coming out of it, tackling those questions. So in a sense, I'm hoping what the future is going to look like, a course that looks like that any church can get involved in or host, essentially, because it is an open discussion as well as a form of education. What's the second part?
I think was it about becoming a movement, and has it impacted the liturgy of the church? Because if people are coming into the church and asking critical questions and saying, that isn't true, this isn't true, does the church then after that have the next service?
It should be impacting what the church looks like. in terms of the institutional church or your church sessions, it should impact that. I was very fortunate one day to go to, I'm not Catholic, but go to a Catholic church for a christening for my husband's cousin, and all the images they used, biblical images or stories and stuff, were all black people or Africans. And I was a bit like, I've never seen this before, and it was like a white majority church, and I was a bit like, why can't we see this in a black majority church? What? I don't understand why we don't see it. Do you know? I mean, it didn't make any, and I was a bit like, okay. And actually, what we're doing and what we're hoping is that people will develop the independence to say, Pastor, do you know what I mean? Like, why don't we try this? Actually, based on what we've been talking about, you say, you know, there's an essence of God connecting to us through oppression and sacrifice and all these kind of things. So why can't we see that in our liturgy, in our images, in the books that we have? Why do you keep selling us this blue-eyed, blonde-haired God all the time? Why can't it look a bit different? Some people, it doesn't matter too much. But I do think that there is room for it, and I'm hoping that it doesn't necessarily come from me burning down churches and, you know putting pastors on YouTube and stuff like that. All that kind of stuff. I hope that this initiative inspires the people at the grassroots level to actually say, let's stop as a congregation, let's change some stuff, obviously according to the word of God, but that brings justice for us as a black community, definitely. I'm hoping that it will inspire that and that it will come from the people as opposed to one particular person. Yeah.
I think in response to your first question, we actually have an expert on this. Gifford, I'm looking at you, who could comment on this much more, with much more expertise than I can. And in response to your second question, I know the Hebrew Bible is such a rich collection of texts, and we can certainly take in that way. And also in response to this comment earlier, the subject problem of the black man, so to speak. I think there is a lot of scope also of cooperation between Jews and black Christians. We've seen it in history. Abraham Heschel was very close to Martin Luther King, and there's a lot of solidarity and mutual support. South Africa, Jews were very much at the forefront and involved in the ANC, and the Hebrew Bible can provide, I suppose, the proof text for this kind of political action that brings the group together and changes the world.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last question, Mike.
Hi, yes. I have a question for Maria Diemling. I hope I pronounce your last name.
Perfect, thank you.
I missed the first part of your talk, but I very much liked your pro-social justice conception of Judaism. And so I have two questions. One, I'm wondering if this sort of conception and encouragement of activism and social justice, global justice, if there are groups or movements either in the past or today that you can point to that embody this sort of conception. So I had one question. And then the second one, perhaps you did say a few words about this, but I missed it. And I know you briefly mentioned human dignity and social justice. I'm wondering, what would be your interpretation of the basis for, or the understanding of human dignity? What is it based in Judaism? Is it relationship to God of one way or another, or some kind of human nature?
In response to your second question, I explained this at the beginning of the talk. It's really based on Genesis 1:27. Human beings are created in the image of God, and therefore we all have the right to human dignity and must treat each other on the basis of the notion that we are reflections of God, in a nutshell. And in response to your first question, there are a lot of very different movements. Social justice has become quite an increasingly important concept in Judaism since the 1960s. And some people see this critically because they think it shifts the way towards a more secular observance of Judaism, that traditional values have become more secular and embrace a really broad church, from rights for Palestinians to rights for LGBT people, abortion rights, environmental rights, etc., etc. So some people see it as critical and say, oh, it's basically the embracing of liberal political values, and this is not what Judaism is about. Having said that, it is now really part of all Jewish denominations, so even the very observant traditional ones. So the current chief rabbi of Britain referred to it specifically in his inaugural speech when he was ordained as a rabbi, and it offers, I suppose, a way of acting in a Jewish way without observing dietary laws or necessarily going to synagogue regularly, but making the world a better place, and that is the underlying issue. It's our obligation to make the world a better place with our means, and there are numerous Jewish organizations that engage with this, really from environmental groups to children asking that their bar mitzvah present should go to a social justice cause, to people planting olive trees uprooted by the Israeli army in Palestinian fields. So all on the umbrella of social justice. So it's a very broad range of often highly political activities, but which people do because they think it's a way of living a meaningful life in a Jewish way. Not necessarily strictly following religion, but in a socially active way.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you ever so much for our speakers.
Thank you.
Fantastic morning.